Hey, this is Julia and welcome to How to Beat Your Depression. The next thing I really want to talk about in these videos is about language. Now, you might not think that language plays a huge part in trying to beat depression, but it really, really does. So much of depression is all of the kind of thoughts and feelings that you have inside of your head day to day, and I know that obviously from personal experience that sometimes what you think can actually be disturbing, upsetting, weird, horrific, angry, violent. Like, it's lots of incredibly negative things that go on in your head. For me personally, I would get continuous kind of repetitive cycles of like very negative conversations in my own head going over and over and over again with really powerful statements that it's almost like you're brainwashing yourself to be miserable all the time. What you need to do is to first of all be aware that this is happening, and then you can kind of actually take action to stop it. So have a think back to the last time you felt kind of terrible. Try and think back a little way and see if before this kind of happened, before you got really sad and felt really depressed, were you saying something to yourself before that? And if you were saying something, what were you saying? I remember one of the times I went to go and see a psychologist, and I was talking about an experience I had walking around Boots or something where I like burst into tears in the middle of the shop. And she asked me what had I been thinking about in the preceding 10 minutes. And it was something really stupid, like I saw a picture of a woman who was advertising something, and you know, you start at that one little point and then your brain kind of escalates all the way down, and somehow I got from that to I'm basically completely useless and I'll never amount to anything, which I just then sort of kept saying to myself over and over. And I remember this woman said, well, I'm not really surprised you burst out crying. You've just said, you know, like 20 really depressing negative statements to yourself. Of course you're going to feel awful. That's a horrible thing to say to someone. Would you say that to somebody else? Absolutely not. You wouldn't say that to like a friend. So why do we say it to ourselves? And obviously I realise it's part of the condition in that this is what goes on in your head, this kind of negative, repetitive cycles that just go over and over, and they are incredibly difficult to break. But it's not impossible. So what I want you to do is the next time you start feeling really low or really sad is to have a think about what you were saying in the preceding minutes before that. It will take a few times of you doing this to remember to do it firstly, and then to remember what was being actually said to you. But hopefully once you start to notice it, you'll see it and you'll see the patterns a lot quicker. The first step of the battle is obviously realizing that this is going on and this is what you're doing to yourself. You're saying these negative things. The next stage is then stopping yourself from saying these negative things to yourself. Obviously, a lot easier said than done. You're effectively going to have to reprogram your brain in a way to stop doing this. Now, there's a few tips and tricks I can suggest to helping do that. Firstly, you might just be able to counteract these negative statements with something more positive. So if you're saying something along the lines of, oh, I'll never amount to anything, you stop yourself and you say, no, that's not right. That's the depression talking. I will amount to something. You literally do the positive equivalent of whatever the negative was. It's quite hard to do, and sometimes when you're feeling really, really low, it's almost like too much effort to think of something positive. But force yourself, try and make yourself say this statement to yourself. The other technique that you can use, if that's a little bit too difficult, is the wonderful, wonderful art of distraction. So what you need to do is, once you realise you're saying these things to yourself, you need to just stop them. Stop them from being said inside your head. So if doing a positive statement is too much to do and it's almost too tiring and you can't manage it, just at the very least, stop yourself going down that path. Which again, easier said than done. But when you think of this the statement in your head, or these statements that you say to yourself, stop and just go, no, I'm not going to think about that. No, I'm not going to think about that. And keep saying it to yourself. And sometimes if you're really kind of free falling a lot and you're almost like a little bit manic, it can be incredibly difficult to stop it even when you tell yourself to stop. That's when distraction is a really, really useful tool to implement. Literally, whatever it is or whatever you were doing, do the opposite. Go somewhere else. If you were watching TV, stand up out of the sofa, walk somewhere else. If you're in a shop, leave the shop, go somewhere else. Distract yourself. Read something, look at something, talk to somebody. Do something that is different that will then break that cycle and trick your brain into thinking about something else. Maybe think of something wonderful that you want to do, or an incredible dinner you're going to make yourself later. Whatever it is, bribe it, trick it, distract it with whatever you can in whatever way possible away from the negative thoughts. Again, I realise this is incredibly difficult to do. You are reprogramming your brain. This is going to take some effort to manage. But rest assured, the first few times you do it, you're going to forget and you'll be like, oh, I should have thought of that thing that Julia said, I didn't. Next time you'll remember it a little bit sooner, then you'll remember it while it's happening. Then you can start implementing the changes. And if you keep doing it, if you stick at it, if you really, really persevere with it, you'll get to the point where it will be so quick, the switch around. And then once it gets to that fast point, you won't even realise that you'll just automatically change the way that you're thinking. Like I said, it's a very, very tricky thing to do. It takes being really observant and really aware of everything that's going on in your head, which is unpleasant sometimes. But if you keep doing it and you keep distracting yourself, or you say, well, I've said one bloody horrible negative thing to myself, I'm going to say something better and something nicer. And you keep doing it and you keep going. It's like trying to train a toddler, you know, the first few times you put them on the naughty step, it's really hard and you just want to give in because you know it's just really difficult. But you persevere at it, you keep going at it. And in the end, the depression, i.e. the toddler, will just give up because you're going to show it that you are going to be unrelenting in pushing this forward and in sticking to your guns. Yes, it's difficult to start with. Every single time you do it, it will get easier, but you have to try. When I first started out in presenting, I've had no contacts. My aunt isn't head of something and my dad doesn't run something else. I mean, if you needed your blood being checked or a printed circuit board, I can help you, but in terms of presenting, no. And getting into presenting, before kind of YouTube became like a kind of path that you could go, it was actually, I felt really isolated and like there was no way into what I wanted to do, and I couldn't see how that could work. Obviously choosing this career was kind of stupid, having depression, you know, completely unstable, like you don't know what's going on, like lots of things that are not good for when you have depression. But I do remember like starting out and finding it incredibly difficult, and the negative things that I would say to myself all the time were, there were a lot of negative things because in between any kind of audition was really long periods of times. There weren't many good points or positive things to kind of cling on to, you know? There were very, very few and far between. So there were lots of periods of feeling quite isolated, just alone with my thoughts, which is never really a good idea. The one thing that I really noticed was, you know, all of my friends who'd chosen, you know, careers were sort of, you know, buying houses and getting like nice cars or whatever. And here I was really broke and not with much and thinking to myself, what the hell am I doing? And every day questioning the decision that I'd made to do the thing that I love. And so much of that negative conversation was about this idea of where I should be. You know, I should be buying a house by now. I should have had a car. I should be able to go on fancy holidays. All of these things that I felt like I was lagging behind on. And coming to the realization that the word should just be, apart from now, should be obliterated from your vocabulary. It's so damaging, it's ridiculous. First of all, right, okay, here's the thing. The word should implies there's some kind of galactic council of rule makers who are out there, who are basically saying, oh, well, when you're 23, you should have done this, and when you're 25, you should have done that. And like, who makes these rules? We're all individuals. Everyone has a completely different journey and a different path. And who the fuck are these people to tell us when we should be doing anything? I also found that sometimes if I had manic like outbursts where I'd like lose my shit and get really, really angry and frustrated, a lot of that was also to do with the word should. It'd be something really silly like, oh, I'm just gonna, I don't know, do something on my computer, oh, it should only take 5 minutes. And then when it takes 15, I'd get really angry with myself because I'll be like, this is like an insult to my intelligence. Why can't I do this in 5 minutes? It should have been done in 5 minutes. Am I stupid? What's wrong with me? You're really stupid. Why can't you do it? You know, this is the kind of thing. I don't need that. And also just, why should it take 5 minutes? It's literally an arbitrary number that I plucked out of the air and assigned to a task. Who knows how long anything is actually gonna take? It's ridiculous. So one of the other things I want you to do is to notice how often you say the word should to yourself. And when you start noticing it, I want you to replace it with a different word. I want you to replace it with could. So just think about the difference between these two sentences. Right. I should be married and have children. Or I should have finished tidying my room within 10 minutes or something. Now if you change those words to could, like I could be married and have children, doesn't that seem like such a much friendlier to yourself statement? Or I could have finished tidying my room, I could have done these things. It's a much nicer way to talk to yourself. And really, with depression, you're your own worst enemy in a lot of ways. You need to give yourself a break and not make, you know, things too difficult for yourself, you know? Could is such a much better word, and I'll tell you for why. So say, oh, I should have been able to fix the problem with my computer in 10 minutes, and then I change it to I could have fixed the problem with my computer in 10 minutes. If I use the word should, if I do it within the 10 minutes, I'm like, well, yeah, obviously that's how long it's supposed to take. If I go over those 10 minutes, I'm stupid, or I'm not, you know, there's something wrong with me. Why can't I do it in 10 minutes? Everybody else does it in 10 minutes. What's the matter with you? Right. Okay. I could do it in 10 minutes, and you do it within 10 minutes. You're like, oh, cool. Did it within 10 minutes. If you go over the 10 minutes, you think to yourself, oh, well, took a little bit longer than I thought. Honestly, should is a horrible word. Make a note of when you say it to yourself. Make the decision to change it to could, and just be nicer to yourself about what is actually expected of you from your life. Your individual, no one else has got like you life. One other thing I want to notice about the language you use to yourself is the use of kind of absolute statements and superlatives and stuff. Things like the worst ever, he never does, ... always. Things that are so resolute. And I know that with my depression, everything is just the worst ever. It's terrible. You know, this always happens. I'm always like this. Life is always like that. You know, it's never going to get any better. There are all these like really powerful statements that have no wiggle room within them. They're so absolute. And the thing is with powerful statements like that, if you keep saying them over and over to yourself, you're going to almost make it happen. It's going to become fact in some way. Or at the very least, you're going to feel that this is actual truth when it isn't. You know, these are just statements that you're saying to yourself. That doesn't mean that they're necessarily true. And for something to be completely absolute means that there is no circumstance outside of that statement where this could, whatever could ever happen. And let's be honest, there probably is, you know. So I think you have to sort of reduce down kind of the severity and the harshness and the powerfulness of your own language. Things like, my life will always be like this. I will always be depressed. I will always be unhappy. And then you say it over and over to yourself and you feel terrible because, oh my God, that's your life? That will always be your life? That's terrible. That makes me sadder. That makes me feel worse. Now, feelings are, and depression is in some degree, these are passing moments of things that you feel, and you can always change how you feel, and you will always change how you feel over the course of your life. You won't always feel this shit all the time. It's not possible. It won't be like that. It can't be like that. And, you know, we're not going to let it be like that. So you need to start trying to think of these moments as just, you might feel like that right now. It might feel completely absolute and resolved that this is how you'll always feel, but you almost need to just say to yourself, okay, yeah, I feel shit, but I just feel shit right now. This is just how I feel now. This isn't how I'm always going to feel, because things will change. You need to be able to see past the moment. And again, it's much easier said than done, because when you feel so low and it's just taken over your life and you get close to that point where you could make a bad decision, it's so consuming, and it's like this heavy velvet curtain of just negativity is over you, and you can't, it's so heavy you can't even push your arms through it to see on the other side. And I get that, and I understand that, because I've been through it. But you have to understand that this is just where you are right now. This isn't your life. Things will get better. You can go through that curtain. You can get to the other side. And that's what all of these videos are about, you know. It's about pushing past that and believing and knowing in your heart that you can get through, you can get past these points. And understanding that it's also the very nature of depression. You know, it wants to make you feel like that in those exact moments. So it's like this sort of spiral of emotion. So you feel bad, and then you feel worse, and and it just keeps going, right? Until you're just depressed a lot of the time, you know. But if you realize that that's what it's trying to do, is trying to make you feel bad, so then you feel worse, and don't let it. Don't let it do that. Stop it in its tracks. Be aware of the language it wants to make you lose. It wants to twist you and twist your mind into feeling the worst that it can absolutely be. And once you realize that there's this outside thing, you know, this depression isn't you. It's not you. It's just a thing that you have. It's separate to you. You are still the same person you were before this. You will find that person again, because they're there. Underneath it all, underneath this fucking heavy fucking curtain that's weighing you down, you're still you. You're still there. And you can find yourself again. Okay? And this is from someone who was so lost, so very lost. You're still there. The person that you love to be, the person who you truly are, is still there underneath all this. And together we can find them. You just have to realize what a tricksy little bastard this thing is, okay? All it wants to do is to keep you where you are and to keep you unhappy. So don't let it. Don't give it that power, you know? By training yourself and training your brain to not let it take things a step further. You know, it's never going to completely go away. I have moments where things flash into my head and things come back, and I think, no, I'm just not going to let it happen. And if I'm not strong enough at that moment to say something positive in the other way, I will literally just distract myself and get myself out of that situation and think about something else. And the thing is, the more you do it, the more you change what you say to yourself. It's like every time you do it, it gets a little bit easier. Every time you do it and you can see that you can change it, makes you feel more powerful. It plants a seed in your head that you can change what you're thinking. You can manipulate it in a positive way. It is possible. And once you've done it a few times, you can do it again and again, because you know what? You can tell yourself, I can change this. And then it almost becomes like second nature. You stop even having to tell yourself to do it. You can shift it and you can change it. And the first step is just noticing how you talk to yourself, what words, what statements you say to yourself, right? Noticing is the first step. That's all you need to do. That's all the homework I want to give you, is just to notice how you talk to yourself and then how you feel afterwards. Once you start noticing, you can start taking action. One other thing I would sincerely recommend for someone who's a bit like me, whose mind would always kind of run away and just run off on these really, really negative paths, is to practice and to learn how to meditate. Meditation is great for a whole number of things, like anxiety, nerves, like loads of different stuff, right? Just even clearing your mind at the start of the day, just so you start off like chilled and like reset on like a good place. And I know it's like, oh, meditation, whatever, but it's really, really useful. And if you can train yourself to meditate, it's kind of like the same skills of learning how to like rewire your language to yourself. And actually, I found meditation really hard to start with because my mind is so manic. Having to learn to slow it down and just to breathe and clear my mind of thoughts. Oh my God, the most useful skill ever, especially if you have depression. And there are so many wonderful apps out there. There's one called Calm, which is great. It's got meditations, guided meditations for a whole bunch of different things. I even went to, in East London, they actually have a meditation centre, and that was really interesting to actually go to a class where you're kind of sitting there and they're almost like training you on how to use your breathing and how to slow everything down. And I mean, you don't have to do that. Like I say, there are some fantastic apps out there that will really, really help. Doing it, even just for 5 minutes a day, learning how to clear your mind. And the thing is, there is a confusion, I think, with, oh, you're just going to have like this weird zen, everything's going to be clear and wonderful and clean in your mind or whatever. It's not. Like, the thoughts still come back in, but you just sort of move away from them. You don't sort of force them away, you just kind of move away from them. They come more just like flashes. And what you want to stop is the thought coming and then you taking it down a path. So you're not trying to solve anything or fix anything. So the thought might come up, oh, about family or about work or but it just sort of comes and it goes. And what you don't want to do effectively is be thinking, oh, well, I should be doing this particular thing then to do that. Because then you're kind of following it down a train of thought. You're just like, no, I'm not going to think about that. No, I'm not going to think about that. And it's almost the same technique. You're sort of kind of gently herding the cat of your mind that's just leaping from one thing to another, and just sort of gently trying to keep it in a place where you're not forcing it to, like, you know, just clear everything out, but it's just sort of like loose and free and kind of just kind to itself as well. Definitely download some meditation apps. I can't recommend it highly enough. I do it at the start of every day. I just spend like 10 minutes where, before I even look at my phone, before I even do anything, I'm going to talk about phones another time, before I do anything, where it's 10 minutes just to myself, and I just meditate, and then I can start the day really, really calm, and it makes me feel strong in my mind. And I talked before, obviously, and I've talked about exercise and things like that, and how important it is to have a strong body, and a strong body can give you a strong mind, but meditation can also make your mind really, really strong too. And what we're trying to do here is build ourselves up and bulk ourselves up and get some gains, right? Body gains, mind gains, like all of it. We want to be beefy as fuck, right? Because the stronger we are, the less control depression has over our lives. The more resilient we can make our body, the more resilient we can make our mind, the more we can control it in some way, means that it's a part that depression doesn't have. And you want to effectively move the cake and the biscuits and the sweets away from depression. It's not for them, it's for us. These are our things, right? This is our territory, right? This is our terrain. The more you take away from depression in terms of control, the stronger you're going to be and the weaker it's going to be. So your homework for this week, please, please, please just listen to yourself. Listen to the things that you say to yourself and how you say them. Make a note of them. What kind of words do you use? How do you phrase things? And then maybe kind of, if you can remember particular statements, dissect them almost and break it down into how it makes you feel. And why would I say that? And is it actually a true statement? And my guess is most of them won't be. So the first step is, of course, to notice. See how you talk to yourself, and then once you start noticing it, you can then respond and take it from there. And little by little and slowly, piece by piece, you can start to change the way you think about yourself and about your life. Take some of that power back. I'll see you next week.